start this session by paying our obeisances to His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So we are in our journey for third chapter. And as we know, third chapter has 43 shlokas. And today we will be wrapping up third chapter. So we have covered the first three sections and part of the fourth section. And we will be, continuing with the last section today. So we'll continue with the fourth section today, which is Nishkam Karma Yoga to set the right example. And just a quick recap on this section. So in the prior section, we went through how a self-realized soul, who is full in knowledge, right? That person doesn't need to work. They don't have prescribed duties because their heart is purified. But yet they do work. They don't quit work. And why? Because they want to set the right example, right? And we saw how Krishna gave Janak Maharaj example, for such self-realized soul. And also we saw how Krishna himself gave his own example, right? He doesn't have any prescribed duty, yet when he descends, he does all, these prescribed duties. Why? To set example for others. And then we saw in last session how attached worker and detached worker, how how a devotee should behave with a non-devotee, right? Attached worker is someone who is attached to the material entanglement, right? So how how it is more of a gradual process, where a devotee should tend to bring up with a gradually, someone who getting them involved and some, to start with something, really something like, working towards supporting some donations or something like this. So gradual upliftment or purification of the non-devotee, and not to disturb them, not to agitate them. So, and then we saw how there is difference between following Krishna and imitating Krishna. So we should be following the instructions of Krishna, working for Krishna and following his instructions rather than imitating, right? And today we will capture the last section of this part, which is working according to one's nature. So this is an important session for us to understand some key concepts, right? So we'll start with, this was the slide which was also shared last time, that we need to work for Krishna and follow him. And we saw in the shloka 31 and 32 how Krishna said that the class of people who follow his teachings, right, what is the outcome? They are free from bondage of this fruiting action. And we gave the example of exalted devotees like Parikshit Maharaj and Arjuna. And on the other side, in shloka 32, Krishna also mentioned what are the results of disregarding his teachings, right? And they, those class of people are befooled and they are ruined, right? They will undergo this birth and death cycle and sufferings again and again. And the examples of those are, Duryodhana and Ravana. Now, something we touched base last time was, the last few questions which we have on the screen, that, even after knowing these teachings, right, someone who is aware that not following the teachings would be sinful, right? This person who is aware of the punishments, will this person stop committing those sins? And we saw not necessarily, right? We tend to, we see it with our own examples quite a lot of time. We know doing something like anger reactions, we know it is not right, but we tend to, right? Even though we know that it is going to be sinful. And why? Because we are impelled to act such, right? Why? Because of our past habits, because of our vasanas and sanskaras. So when someone who is aware of the punishment is not able to stop committing them, then talking about people who would be unaware, right, of these teachings, what to, it is a worst case for them, right? And we will continue in this because today's topic, like I said, it is like working in our own nature, right? That was the topic which we saw. Now, what does this mean? We each one of us have a deep rooted conditioned nature, right? We are conditioned soul when we are in this material world, right? That's why we are saying conditioned, right? We are controlled. And each of us have a deep rooted conditioned nature. So we'll start with the first shloka for the day. So Sadrisham cheshtate swasyaha prakritir jnanavanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Biswaji, will you be able to read the English translation?
Hare Krishna. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature. For everyone follows the nature he has acquired from the three modes. What can reflections accomplish?
Right, thank you. So repression is suppression, right? Suppressing something, trying to control something. So Krishna is clearly saying here that even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, right? Because each one of us have our own nature, which is acquired from what? From these three modes of material nature. Yeah, this material nature, right? Now, this is also one of the verse, like when we went through the 2.47 verse of Karmanyavadikaraste. This is also one of the verse which is most misinterpreted when we see different commentaries, right? Because we have the tendency to think when we see this, nigraha kim karishyati means nigraha means that repression, suppression. We have our own nature. So even if we stop ourselves, it's not gonna accomplish something. So why should we, right? That's the mindset when the kind of interpretation which is done for this. Now that's why it is very important for us to understand when we see repression what can repression accomplish, this nigraha kim karishyati, what exactly it means. Otherwise anyone can do anything, right? Saying that I couldn't control, right? I could. So, and Krishna says saying that in Gita. So we need to understand what exactly this sentence means, right? So we'll just go through a bit of that so that our understanding is right. Yeah. So like we said that due to the contact of this material nature, each one of us have our own deep rooted nature, right? Now when we talk about when Krishna is saying in this shloka prakriti, when he uses this word, what does prakriti mean? What prakriti is he talking about? This material nature, right? So far we have seen prakriti is material nature. Now, what is this material nature made up of? We slightly also touched in prior classes. Material nature composes of three modes. That's what Krishna is highlighting in this verse, right? Three modes of material nature. Can somebody tell me what are the three modes of material nature?
Satgun, Rajgun, and Tamgun.
Yeah, thank you, Viswaji. Exactly. So Sattva Gun, which is mode of goodness, Rajas, which is mode of passion, and Tamas, which is mode of ignorance, right? So this material nature is made up of these three modes, right? And based on these three modes, Krishna has classified varnas in this Prakriti, right? And that's why in this table you will see, we need to understand the difference between Prakriti and Vasana here. Yeah. So Prakriti is, like I said, this material nature is made up of three modes. And based on those three, Krishna has made different varnas, four varnas, based on these three modes itself. And can somebody remember what are the four varnas Krishna has made? I can give the first one, Brahmana.
Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra.
Shudra, exactly. So Krishna has made four varnas, right? And we'll see this in fourth chapter, where he says Chatur Varnam Maya Shrishtam. So he has, set up these four varnas: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. right? Now that's why we need to understand, and these varnas, this mode of nature, the mode of goodness, passion and ignorance, we had compared this in our initial 9 sessions. Also there was a session completely on this, right, where we showed a palette of different colors, right? So these three modes, each of us have it in different percentages or different combinations, levels of combinations in each of us, right? So um, the percentage of goodness varies to passion, ignorance. So it's like it's varied for each one of us, right? And that's what Krishna is saying here. This is our innate, deep rooted, psychophysical nature, which is the combination of these modes, and each one of us have our own psychophysical nature. Yeah, which is, because these are created by the varnas are created by Krishna, so these are within the principles of dharma, right? And we need to, whatever varna we are in, and we also discussed before that in Kali Yuga all of us are shudras, right, born shudras. So the varna we are in, what we need to do is we need to dovetail that to Krishna consciousness. Whereas on the other side, when we see that word Prakriti again, yeah, in this shloka, it does not refer to kama, krodha, lobha, that all that, you know, it is, those are called as vasanas, because these are material desires, right? So we learned how, as a soul, you know, we are not the only doer, right? We saw that cycle. So we are one of the doers. And what is our main thing? Action we do is desire, right? Based on our material desires, right? Which are all these, yeah, which is kama, krodha, lobha, and moha, right? These are the vasanas, right? So these vasanas can infect our varnas in which varna we are, right? Because these desires are the trigger points, right, for everything. And it's like, if we dovetail these desires into Krishna consciousness, then we can go back to Krishna, right? That is the key. And these are actually, because these are material desires, these are superficial, right? It is not our psychophysical nature, it is all coming out of our desire. And because they are, and we can wish or we can desire, many material things, but they are not in the precincts of dharma. So we need to reject it, right? Something like, we desire to eat meat, right? It is not as per dharma, right? It is our desire, it is our that, kama, right? So that lobha, right? So we need to reject these, because these are not within the principles of dharma. If the desires are dovetailed to Krishna, then these are within the precincts of dharma, right? So when a person who is in knowledge, he will continue to act according to his varna, but will control the vasana. That is what should be our approach, right? So we should work according to our psychophysical nature, which is our varna, yeah, and try to control the vasanas, yeah. So it looks, like a brahmana, a shudra, right? For a shudra, if he is asked to work as a brahmana, right, who are so well noted with the scriptures and all of that, and they do the teaching and everything, for a shudra it will be very difficult, right? Similarly, we think that a brahmana's, varna is easy, because it's just about learning and, living that kind of comfortable life, right? Living pure and clean life, we think it is easy, right? But for a shudra it will be, it is really difficult to live like that, right? So it's important for us to really understand that when Krishna is mentioning here in this verse, he's talking about everyone acts as per the own nature within, by these three modes, right? He's talking about the varna, not vasanas. And the next shloka which he will be talking about will be the vasanas. We'll go through that. Then I think it will make it more clear once we go there. Yeah. So with regards to this shloka, there is a, in the purport, Prabhupada has mentioned this very important thing. So, Hari Krishna ji, will you be able to read this?
Yeah, yes, Mataji. Therefore, without being fully in Krishna consciousness, one should not give up his occupational duties. No one should suddenly give up his prescribed duties and become a so-called yogi or transcendentalist artificially. It is better to be situated in one's position and uh, to attain Krishna consciousness under superior training. Thus, one may be freed from the clutches of Krishna's Maya.
Thank you. So this might remind us of that Mithyachari, right? We learned the different grades when Krishna calls pretender, right? Earlier in this chapter. So that's what he's highlighting. Don't be a Mithyachari, right? Don't be a pretender. This is a gradual process. And we can only dovetail ourselves when we have a superior guidance or shelter, which is very important. Yeah. And the other thing here is, by that guidance and by that superior training, or shelter, one may be freed from the clutches of Krishna's Maya, right? So Krishna's Maya, so this material nature is what? Krishna's energy, right? And Krishna highlights this in 7th chapter, that how this material nature is one of his energies. Yeah. And unless someone is situated in transcendental Krishna conscious platform, we cannot get freed from the influence of this Maya, right? This modes. Maya is the modes of the material nature. Yeah. So it is the 14th verse of 7th chapter, which Krishna mentions that, only through Krishna consciousness we can overcome this, only through, service to Krishna. So it should be, I think we also discussed before that suddenly somebody, we should not give up. It's not a sudden process. It's a gradual process, right? We should, never give up the prescribed duties. I think we have discussed quite a lot on, this before. Krishna doesn't encourage inactivity nor giving up the prescribed duties, right? It's more of gradually dovetailing ourselves into Krishna consciousness over with the superior training, right? Now, the next shloka, this is, so last shloka we spoke about, like I said, the varnas, right? In this shloka, Krishna is highlighting about vasanas, how these impact, right? So indriyasyarte ragadveshau vyavastitau tayorna vasham agachet tau hi asya paripantinau. So Jyoti ji, will you be able to read this?
Sure. There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Bhagavad Gita 3.34. Thank you.
Thank you. So in the last shloka, Krishna had mentioned that, one works as per their own nature, right? Acquired from the three modes of material nature, which was varnas, right? Now here we are talking about indriya, right? Which is senses, right? And these are about vasanas, this shloka, where Krishna highlights that there are principles to regulate attachments and aversions, right? Pertaining to the senses and their sense objects, right? So we should, try our, our aim should be not to come under control of these vasanas, right? We should try to, not be under their control, right? Because like Krishna says, they are such attachment or aversions. They are nothing but the stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. And that's why, we see in Krishna consciousness, we follow those 4 regulative principles, which you can see on here on the screen. So no intoxication, no gambling, no meat eating, no illicit relationships, right? Now we need to regulate, we need to follow these regulative principles. And that's what Krishna is saying. We need to regulate our attachment towards these, um, these misdoings, right? Because these, when we get, our senses get attracted to sense objects, and we tend very easily to get attached to these misdoings, right? And these in turn make us as the stumbling block for us to progress into our spirituality, right? It is holding us back. Our tendency to get attached to these things is holding us back to attain our ultimate goal, right? And that's why you see in the mind control chart or the sadhana chart we have shared, you will see, these 4 regulative principles as well there, right? It's like, when we have this and when we follow these, it it acts like a medicine for us to overcome this, very, severe disease what we are undergoing in this material world, right? And that we'll see further, when we talk about how to regulate this, right? How to regulate this and what helps. We know that, right? Chanting, reading, hearing, this purifies our heart, right? And this regulates, this helps us, and along with that, following the regulative principles helps us to progress there, right? So here, one thing we see is when we say about regulating the attachments, we understand, right? When it comes to senses and their sense objects, we have gone through that cycle also before, right? In 2.62 and 6.3. So, contemplation on that particular sense object, the senses get driven away, and then the whole cycle starts, which eventually lets us to fall down, right? So when we talk about regulating attachment for, for attachment of our senses to those sense objects, it makes sense. But when we talk about aversion, just to be sure here, Krishna is not saying about aversion to these, but he's saying aversion to the guidance, we get from this superior training or superior shelter from our senior devotees. Yeah. So they are always around to direct us, right? Trying to help us out. Now we should make sure that we are not, we will, we also, I don't know if any of you have seen, but we see that quite some people, when they get this guidance, they are so fortunate to get that guidance from senior devotees, from, that supreme, from that superior shelter, but it's not valued, right? They don't understand it and they don't want to understand it. That's the thing. So aversion to such, aversion to such devotees, such shelter, what we would get, that should not be there. That's what he's saying. So regulate the attachments, what we have, and then to not have that aversion, to regulate that aversion as well, right? So by following these, basically, right, what happens? It's the mind control chart, right? So it gradually tries to control our mind, and we eventually see how we start getting that regulation in our attachment to these sense objects, which is like we start getting a bit, realizing the detachment, we develop a detachment towards this material things. And detachment to material things is what is, we are not, we are running away from, it's like we are running towards Krishna, right? Detachment to these is nothing but attachment, getting more closer to Krishna, right? So so we need to understand that this verse purely talks about vasanas, right? Which are the material desires, right? And how to curb that material desire, right? That's what it says, how not to how to curb, but it says that how we should control. We need to try to control, because those are the stumbling blocks for our progress. Yeah. So yeah, I again, this is Krishna is reiterating this. We have seen this before, where he highlights that do your duty as per your own psychophysical nature. Don't try to copy or imitate others. Otherwise, that would be a heavy more fall down, rather than better is that you do what you are, into. So with that said, think Prasadji, will you be able to read this?
Hare Krishna Mataji. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faulty, than another's duties perfectly. Disturbation in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging the another's duty, for to follow another's path is dangerous. 3.35. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you. So we can see here how Krishna is clearly mentioning, it's pretty straightforward, right? That better to discharge one's prescribed duties. Yeah, because it comes out naturally from us. It's based on our psychophysical nature, like we learned, right? Anything we do spiritually or materially, it should be according to our own nature, not stepping in or imitating, somebody else, or that competing, into others, stepping into others' shoes. That's what we say, right? So, but whether, both, it may be spiritual or material, our approach has to be the same rather than imitating. It might be that, we see in our day-to-day work, or even in spirituality, we would see that some person is really good at maybe, at preaching. Some person may be really good at, going out and getting things done. Some person might be really good at management. So we can similarly see in our material life as well. So each of them are, have their own psychophysical nature, and they are good at that. So, we should be trying to focus on what we are, based on our nature, rather than stepping into, somebody else. If we try to do that, it will be more dangerous. That's what Krishna is saying. It will be of a more fall down, right? So we will just quickly revise what we have done in these 3 shlokas, because it is important for us to understand, right? And so the first one is, every one of us have a deep rooted conditioned nature due to contact with the material nature. Yeah, that's what we learned in the first, which talks about varnas, right? And the next one speaks about vasanas. One should not come under the control of attachment and aversion, which are 2 obstacles in the path of self-realization. Right? Attachment, to to material things, and aversion from the the spiritual guidance we would get. Yeah, superior guidance. So material duties are as per one's psychophysical conditions under modes of nature. Spiritual duties are ordered by guru or Lord service, right? So like in spirituality, we'll see that if we get an order from our guru, it might be that it is not sometimes based on the psychophysical nature of ours, but still we take it because it is coming from the superior, right? From our guru. Yeah, and that is in Krishna's service. So it's different, right? We cannot imply that to material. So it is especially with spiritual duties. Yeah, however, whether material or spiritual, one should stick to his prescribed duties up till the death. Everyone has to cleanse his hearts by gradual process. Again and again, we are highlighting, these are quite repetitive points, right? So this is a gradual process, not abrupt or not at speed. And with that said, now we'll go into the last section of today, yeah, which is really important as well. Yeah, and Arjuna really asks a great, question again for our benefit here. So the next verse is Arjuna's question, and then Krishna answers, his question, and then in the end, Krishna also helps us to identify, what this enemy is, and where is it found. So it's like a mission where we want to know, who is our enemy, and once we know who is it, we would, once we get that answer, we would like to know how can we conquer that enemy, right? The strategy. right? Where the enemy is located, how can we, conquer that enemy over? So that's the strategy here we see, right? So the next shloka, can I have, I think it is Kavyaji, can you read the Sanskrit and the English?
Yes, Mataji, I'll try. अर्जुन उवाच अत केन प्रयुक्तोऽयं पापचरितपुरुषः अनिच्छन्नपि वाशेष बलादिव नियोजितः. Arjun said, O descendant of Vrasni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you. So Arjuna is asking, the million-dollar question, where we are saying that this degrades us, we are not able to control, then, what is it? Ataha kena prayuktoyam, right? He's saying, what is it? Papam charati purushaha. We tend to do that sin, anichan, that is very important, without desire. Even without desire, we tend to do it. Yeah. So what is it? Balad eva niyojitaha. Balad is by force. We feel a kind of force through which, even though unwillingly, we tend to do, that we are impelled to do that sinful activity. And I think we can correlate this, right, practically ourselves as well, that we face this for sure situation. We can take, it's like a smoker or a drunkard, right? They are aware that it is not good for their health. It is causing maybe some organs being damaged for them. It is causing them to be, fatal. Still, they get impelled, right? They get so, there's a kind of force which makes them, even after being aware of the consequences, they tend to do it eventually, right? It's like an addiction, right? It's like it becomes a habit, and we saw how the habit starts, right? It all starts from the thoughts, and how that habit, it becomes, it's like an addiction in the higher version, right? So Arjuna is asking the same thing, that what is it which kind of forces us to do something such, which even unwillingly, that's the key thing, you know um, and in here we can correlate this with a story. I don't know if do any of you know Ajamila story? No, this is so this is a story, from Bhagavatam, where Ajamila was a Brahmana, um, and he was actually practicing his Brahmanical culture very well. He had a family, he had his wife, he had kids, he had his parents. He was really following his Brahmanical culture at home, right? But what happened was, once he saw a insane scene, a prostitute with a man, and that, if impacted his mind. Yeah. And he had a downfall, right? He then, because of that, he got so attached that he kicked out his wife, his children, his parents out of his home, and he got the prostitute to his home. And he married, and for this prostitute he started doing all sinful things. He started even stealing from people so that he can feed his family, completely opposite to how he was running before, right? So he was not able to control his desires, right? He desired when he saw that scene, and eventually he was not able to control his desires. So that made him do every time much more than before, much more sinful activities than before. So he eventually had a very bad downfall, right? Now what happened is, he got many sons from the prostitute as well. And he during death, he was really ill. It was his time, and he called out he named one of his son, as Narayana. So at death time, he was actually he was very attached to this son in particular. He was very close. So at the time of death, he called out Narayana, his son. He was calling him out loudly. Yeah. Because of his attachment to his son. But because the name itself is Narayana, but that's what we learned, right? There is no difference between Krishna's name and Krishna himself, right? That is the power of the name. And that's why, in Kali Yuga, what do we say? Chanting is the main sacrifice, right? We are chanting, name is equal to Krishna. So that's the power of name. So he called out for Narayana. And, when he was calling out Narayana and approaching death, because of his sinful activities, Yamudutas came. But because he called out Narayana, Vishnu Dutas also came. And that's why when Vishnu Dutas came, because of his, that name which he took out, he got a second chance. There's a book also called A Second Chance, which is completely describing Ajamila's story. But he got a second chance wherein he got a birth where he could, he could practice spiritual life. So so even what we learn from here is even a man of a good character who has practiced, that kind of Brahminical culture tends to act, eventually fall down, unwillingly even, it's kind of a force. The desires are, it's such a huge force. It's like impelling you to act, right? That's what Arjuna is asking. Yeah. So let's see what Krishna answers Arjuna. So this is a very important shloka where Krishna mentions what is it which tempts us, which forces us. So Reshma ji, will you be able to read this?
Yes, Mataji. Kama esha krodha esha rajo guna samudhavaha mahashano mahapapam vidhvan yena miha vairinam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. 3.37.
Thank you. So this is the answer which Krishna is giving, right? So kama esha, krodha esha. So kama is lust and krodha, which is wrath, right? Rajaguna samudbhavaha. Rajaguna is mode of passion, and primarily we say, in this world, we are all in mode of passion. Okay. The mode of passion, samudbhavaha, means it is born of, and mahashano mahapapna. Mahashano is all devouring or degrading. Yeah. Mahapapma, it is greatest sin, right? Mahapap. Vidhi enam iha vairinam, right? So this is in this material world, vairinam, this is the greatest enemy. What? Lust, right? And this lust, Krishna highlights that it is born from this material mode of passion, right? So what do we learn here? Krishna is clearly saying we tend to have this material thinking, right? That my enemy is this, my enemy is that. We are thinking always people around us. We are gauging them, that this person is so and so, this person. We think that they are our enemies. But Krishna is very importantly highlighting here that our worst enemy is in fact inside us, not outside, right? It's just us who keep thinking then this and that is my enemy, But Gita clearly teaches us, we have much more worse enemy within us. So it is a fight inside, not outside, right? And this lust is within us, right? And that's why we say that spirituality is in working inner process, right? It's experiential because the enemy is inside us, right? The process is also internal, right? So Arjuna is not asking this because he wants to gain something materially. He was really materially well placed, right? But he's asking this to gain on spiritual platform, right? We see people, we have so many different kind of courses nowadays, right? Like anger management, stress management, tell me a management, different kind of yogas, everything, right? So that too we pay quite a lot, right? And why do we do all this? So that we feel better, for sense gratification, right? we, we want to progress materially, and if we control this, then we will progress materially, right? It's more self-centered, right? So Arjuna is asking this because he wants to highlight the root cause. What is the root cause for us to undergo these many waves up and down, right? That attachment, detachment, we go over all every cycle, and even in single day we can go different kind of emotions, right? So Arjuna is asking Krishna this so that we can overcome the main root cause analysis, right? Root cause, so that we can control our mind with it. And Krishna is, that's why, giving us this root cause of overcoming all this anger, stress, all of this, all of this can be addressed when we address this root cause, yeah, which is not stress management, anger management, it's management of lust, right? That's what Krishna is saying, because lust is our greatest enemy, yeah, which prevents us. Whole of this chapter is about Nishkam Karma Yoga, right? Now lust is the main thing which stops us to progress in this overall Nishkam Karma Yoga, to do something without expecting the results, right? So further, just a quick flow, right? That how, from that same shloka, how initially we know that we are all pure, right? As souls, right? When we come, we all have our natural love for Krishna, right? As our original position as soul, we have that pure love for Krishna. But as soon as we come in contact with this material world, especially, in a mode of passion, which is the primary mode which we are all in, right? So especially with mode of passion, that love for Krishna transforms into lust, yeah. That love for Krishna, which has Krishna in the center, transforms into lust. Lust is with self as center, right? With sense gratification, yeah. And if this lust is not satisfied, what happens? Anger or wrath. And this is, it degrades further into mode of ignorance. Anger and wrath is nothing but mode of ignorance, and then eventually we fall down completely in this material existence, right? We are in an illusion that yes, I am right, my way is the right way, that kind of a thing, right? So overall, what do we learn from the top? If we are trying to be independent of Krishna, then we end up into, we are in an illusion, right? And it will make us fall down everything, right? We can only be happy if we use that desire to dovetail to Krishna, that minute free will, which we spoke about in last class. We all have our free will, right? We have to dovetail that, right? We have been given the opportunity by Krishna, but it's in our hands to dovetail it or not. It's like, for our children, we see Krishna has given them a good family. We are all attending this, Gita. We are, children have been given a kind of, a devotee family, right? That atmosphere, right? Where, they can see their parents spiritually progressing, right? And these children are fortunate to get that atmosphere at home, right? So they are given that facility by Krishna, but ultimately it depends on them, whether they want to eventually, when they grow, to dovetail their desire, utilizing the opportunity given by Krishna to Krishna consciousness or something else. So that free will always be there. Yeah. So, and yeah, so free will always be given by Krishna. So to drive that inner enemy lust, um, that, with this inner enemy, we can only dovetail, we can curb it by changing that lust into love for Krishna. Right? Okay. So yes, so we may see that we will, it's not that devotees don't have anger or, something, they cannot have that wrath, right? We have just given here example of Hanumanji. He's a classic example for us, where that mode of passion, what we talk about, we are infected that in this material world, right? But we see Hanumanji was transcendental. He was using his passion completely in Ram's service, right? So he used everything, his anger, his talent, everything to serve Ramji, right? So he was a great servitor of Lord Rama, and he exhibited his wrath, his anger, by burning the whole of Lanka, right? And here also, in Bhagavad Gita, we see Arjun also, when he fights, right? He puts his wrath across, upon his enemies. For whose satisfaction? For Krishna's satisfaction. So again, dovetailing that to Krishna. Yeah. So therefore, lust and wrath, when they are employed in Krishna consciousness activities, they become our friends. They don't let us fall down. They elevate us. They get us more closer to Krishna. But if they are employed on material platform for fulfilling something for ourselves, right, with that sense gratification, then they turn up our enemies. Okay. So it's all about dovetailing and the consciousness, right? Krishna consciousness. That's why that word consciousness is the key, right? So again, now that Krishna has answered, lust is the thing, right? This is your greatest enemy, right? Now he's going to tell us where does lust sit, the location of lust within our body, right? So that it's easy for us to find to attack it. It's like an enemy, right? Now it's like, before we came to know that this is our enemy, now we are coming to know from Krishna where is the enemy located. Krishna is making it so easy for us, right? So this is actually very important shloka as well. We have a next slide which can explain, what exactly this is compared to. So there are 3 degrees of covering of lust. Okay. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. We'll see this in a bit of detail here in this shloka. Right. So, right. So we see these 3 examples highlighted here, right? So as fire is covered by smoke, mirror by dust, and embryo by womb, right? Now, soul is covered by different degrees of lust, right? Krishna is saying that the consciousness, in humans, the covering is really thin. It's like the fire covered by smoke, and because the covering is thin, the chances of overcoming this lust covering is highest, among different living entities. This is right. You have 3 living entities. So each living entity have different degree of lust covering, right? So humans have the covering like the fire on this, fire and the smoke, right? So we see that, when there is a fire, when there is smoke, when there is smoke, we still see there is fire. as the, we can still see the sparks, right? And it is very easy for us to just, maybe give a blow and be able to see the fire, right? But when it comes to animals, the next example, animals are compared to dust on the mirror. If there is a thick dust, on the mirror coating, right, we cannot see anything beyond, right? And we have to actually take up an action of, really, it's heavy, cleaning which is needed, right, to get off that heavy rusted dust coating. And that's why we say that in animals the layer of lust is medium, and that's why the chances of overcoming that are also medium. And the third kind of living entity is trees, which is compared with embryo in the womb. We cannot see, the embryo is the thickest, right? We cannot see anything, right? So, and that's why this is the layer stated for trees, where the covering of lust is intense and the chances of coming out is minimal. Even in human beings, we see that there are different, levels of degree of this covering of lust as well, right? We see that the more a person is materially conscious, uh, the more lust is giving troubles. The more the person is spiritually conscious, the least we will get affected, because that kind of detachment starts coming in. Now, why is Krishna saying this? It is for us to give that hope, right? With this birth, we also saw in 9 sessions how important and crucial is this human birth. Out of 84 lakh species, after that we get this human birth. And humans have that consciousness, to go back to Godhead, right? They have that developed consciousness. So Krishna is giving us a high hope here, to Arjuna. Through Arjuna, he is telling us that as humans, we have the highest chances to curb down this lust, because the layer, is so thin. It's really slight, right? It's not like trees, right, which cannot walk, which cannot talk, which, doesn't wear anything, which suffers, be it hot or cold, um, so a living entity is given that if that form of life as trees, if the living entity has been very sinful in past, right? We see a story in Bhagavatam where I don't know if any of you are aware about Manigriv and Nalakuver. They were cursed by Narad Muni because of their proudness, because of them committing that sin. They're cursed by Narad Muni to take birth as trees. And they took birth as trees in the courtyard of Krishna's home, in Nand Maharaj house. And eventually Krishna, liberated. But overall, in purport, Prabhupada has mentioned that in the form of human being, the living entity may revive a little Krishna consciousness. And if he makes further development, the fire of spiritual life can be kindled in human form of life. So by carefully handling of the smoke in the fire can be made to blaze and the smoke can be reduced, right? Therefore, the human life form is a chance for the living entity to escape the entanglement of material existence. Yeah, in human form of life, one can conquer the enemy lust by cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance, right? Now, we always say that spirituality is gradual, right? We keep saying that, but we need to also understand that we don't have as many years as people in Satyuga had, right? Thousands of years of life. And in Kali Yuga, we see that how uncertain our lives are, right? Every now and then we hear, that something mishappening happening, with our near, close ones or known ones, right? So there is no guarantee at all. So even though we say, yes, it has to be taken gradually, but it has to be treated. Prabhupada says that it has to be treated with urgency. Krishna consciousness is to be taken as an urgency or emergency, right? Because we don't know what may happen, the very next day. So the earlier you take it, the chance for you to develop in it, and we cannot wait for hundreds years like before, ages, like Treta Yuga and Satyuga and Dwapar Yuga, for us to maybe, yes, at certain time point, we have enough lifespan. No, but Kali Yuga, we have such short lifespan and the least intelligence as well. So it has to be taken as matter of urgency, right? So because that's the level of thinking, you will find people who will say, what is wrong with lust, greed? There is nothing wrong. That's the level of degradation in Kali Yuga, right? Okay, so with that, we will move to 39th shloka. And Biswaji, will you be able to read it?
Yes, ma'am. Abrutam Jnanam etena Ganino Nitya Vari Varina
Vairina.
Kamarupena
Mhm.
Varina Kamarupena Kaunteya Dus Duspu Renacha. Okay.
Mhm.
Thus, the wise living entities, pure consciousness become covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire.
Thank you. So avratam jnanam etena, right? Jnanam. Avratam means covered, right? Jnanam is covered. And the next word is nitya vairina, means nitya means eternal, and vairina is enemy, eternal enemy. Kamarupena kaunteya. Kamarupena means in the form of lust. Who is our eternal enemy and who covers the knowledge? Lust. Kamarupena kaunteya. Yeah. Dushpurena, dushpurenana lena cha, right? So it is never satisfied. Dushpurena means never satisfied, right? So why we have given this picture is because it is similar to pouring ghee in fire. Lust is never satisfied, and it keeps burning always like a fire. um, you know uh, we keep pouring thinking fire will get satisfied at certain time, but it doesn't, right? It is never, right? So yeah, this is from the purport. um, so how, about lust leads to degradation. So while one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer, right? When we gain something materially, right, it does give us some kind of happiness, right? But getting that happiness, we know that is temporary. At the same time, it may develop into that habit, right? So we'll be entangled into doing that material thing again and again, right? And as we do more and more material thing, it is nothing but what? It is the attachment we are getting, right? That lust again, right? We are in fact pouring that ghee in fire. We are making our lust develop more and more, right? So we should always aim not for that temporary happiness, but our ultimate goal, which is our permanent happiness, right? So that is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. That's what Prabhupada is saying, right? This kind of attachment of us just getting that small happiness, making ourselves look into that as the world, that is the main enemy. That is nothing but the lust, right? Getting attached to do that, right? Now this is the this is the sitting places now. So indriyani mado buddhir asyadishthanamuchyate eter vimohayati esha jnanam avritya dehinam. Right? The senses, the mind, and intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders them. So, like we said, Krishna highlights the sitting places, right? Each of our senses are attracted to sense objects, right? Our eyes might be, liking to see something really beautiful. Our ears want to hear something nice, so it's like our mind also wants to dream and number of things, right? So each of our senses, overall, they are attracted to sense objects, right? So that's what Krishna is saying. So he's giving hints that these are the location of this lust, so that we can conquer the enemy, yeah, and know that where he can be found, yeah. So we need to work on these three places as our target. And how to do that? So before we go there, yeah, this is the strategy which I just spoke. So maybe Hari Krishna ji, will you be able to read this?
Yeah, yes, Mataji. The enemy has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul. Lustly intelligence influences the spiritual soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter and thus with the mind and senses. The spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this as true happiness.
Thank you. So Prabhupada is highlighting how this, our greatest enemy, lust, has captured different strategic positions, right? We can see how all these are such key places, right? Senses, mind, and intelligence, really strategic positions, right? Now, lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego, right? And identify ourselves as the body, right? That was the first lesson which Krishna taught as well in Bhagavad Gita, right? So, what we tend to do is, because we think we are this body, we become addicted to enjoying these material senses. And we make the mistake that this is our true happiness, right? So this lusty intelligence, intelligence is, will see the flow, as what is higher than what, you know in further shlokas. So to get the key thing here, it is the top one is intelligence, right? So how can this intelligence be more, transformed from lusty intelligence to transcendental intelligence? That needs to be transformed, right? First of all, so we need to transform lusty intelligence into transcendental, so that we can get our ultimate happiness, which is our real true happiness, right? And we learned that in 2.6 shloka, right? Nasti buddhira yuktasya nacha yuktasya bhavana. Yeah. So in that shloka we saw that by connecting to Krishna, through chanting, reading, and hearing, we will get that transcendental intelligence, right? And through that transcendental intelligence, we eventually get the steady mind, and we get our ultimate happiness in the end, right? So we know we have, Krishna has already given us, right, in 2.6s, that how can the intelligence be transformed into transcendental intelligence. Okay. Now, regulating the senses, right? So Jyoti ji, will you be able to read this, Sanskrit and English?
Yeah. तस्मात्त्वा मिलिन्दे याने यादो नियम्यं भर्तश्रम पापमाना प्रजय अयन ज्ञान विज्ञान नाशनम. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas in the very beginning occurred this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Bhagavad Gita 3.41. Thank you.
So again, senses play a key role, right? And Krishna is saying, very beginning itself, this has to be done by regulating the senses. And we learned this in second chapter, right? The whole cycle that contemplation, and then our senses get, by that contemplation, senses get attached to sense objects, right? That results into lust, right? And lust into anger and delusion. So the whole cycle continues until fall down, right? So the same thing is here. Krishna is saying, firstly, slay this destroyer. So even in it's again, mind control chart. It kind of tailors our sense control, right? It tries to subdue this greatest enemy. So I would request you all to please, utilize the mind control chart or the sadhana chart we have shared, that Excel sheet, to regularly track, that will really give you the boost, to see the progress when you see your last month's versus this month. And feel free to share it as well, because it will be great inspiration for others. We are all together in this, right? So yeah, so this is an enemy and we have to work upon ourselves, right? Nobody can help us to cut down. We can only get the support. But in this journey of, curbing that lust, it is mainly us and only us, ourselves. We have to have our own sincere efforts to curb this, right? We can get support, but nobody can action unless it's only us who have to action to, to curb this. And this is very practical, right? So when we, get attracted to something, we should remind ourselves that, even before I have tried this and it never worked permanently. So why should I put again that effort into the same approach of this material life to fulfill that desire, right? So let us try the other side of the coin as well, right? Using the time and energy in building our spiritual life. At least we can try, right? We have tried several times on the other side, right? We have to try, and the try has to be really hard, right? Otherwise it's not easy to curb this lust, right? And it doesn't allow us, it doesn't allow us to come out of this material propensities we have, right? Now here there are two things, jnana and vijnana. We'll see this further in the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita as well. The difference. So jnana is mainly, the understanding that we are not this body, but we are the soul, right? That is the jnana part of it. When we talk about vijnana, yeah, it refers to more specific knowledge, right? That we are, yes, we are spirit souls, and that we are the understanding of our constitutional position, that jivera swarupa hoye krishnera nityada. So that our understanding of that constitutional position, that we are the eternal servants of Krishna, and our relationship with, that there is a supreme soul, there is a soul, and our relationship, we are eternal servitors. So that's the difference between jnana and vijnana. Yeah. So conscious of time, we just have 2 more shlokas to go. Just on this, this is a nice thing from purport. So Prasadji, will you be able to read this?
Yes, Uncle. Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of a of God by following the regulative principles of devotional service. So from any stage of life or from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness. Devotional service of the Lord and turn the lust into love of God, the highest perfectional stage of human life. 4 Regulative Principles 3.41. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's very nicely, understanding. Um, we let's not think we are late. We should at least start, right? So it gives us an assurance that even a late beginner, the key thing is, following, doing our chanting, reading, and hearing, and following the 4 regulative principles. This is the key. That's what Prabhupada said. So may it be any stage of life, we need to understand the urgency. Like I said, we are in this yuga. The lifespans are short. It's so uncertain. So we need to understand that there is an urgency, and we need to start with our devotional practice, by following these 4 regulative principles. It is urgent, right? Okay, so moving further, yes, this is the flow chart, or the hierarchy, we call it. And Kavyaji, will you be able to read this?
Yes. इंद्रियाणि परन्य और इंद्रियेभ्यः परं मनः मनसस्तु परा बुद्धिर् यो बुद्धेः परतस्तु सः. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So this is a hierarchy which Krishna is giving, right? And we'll see this here in the next slide to make it easy to follow. And do all of you remember this Katha Upanishad? We did this in, verse. We did this in 9 sessions. Like the horses are the senses, the reins are the mind, the driver is the intelligence, and the passenger is the soul. So this shloka is giving exactly, the hierarchy, that mind is higher than senses, intelligence is higher than mind, and soul is even higher than intelligence, right? And the next slide, that's what hierarchy we have given. So we see that the dull matter, which is the body, comes at the least, right? And then senses, mind, intelligence, and soul, right? So that's why, because one of the key things here is, where is the mind sitting? We have spoken a lot about mind, right? And we see again in 6th chapter, Arjuna highlighting it is easy to control the wind, but not easy to control the mind, right? And Krishna acknowledges that as well. So mind is sitting between this, senses and intelligence. And Krishna mentioned that the lust sitting places are these 3: senses, mind, and intelligence, all 3, right? And mind, because it is in between, it's very important to control it, right? And how we, again, 2.6 is shloka, nastir buddhirayuktasya, right? We learned how, by chanting, reading, and hearing, the vibrations, how our brain cells get sanctified, right? We hear, by hearing those, our chanting, about Krishna overall, how our heart gets purified, and then when heart gets purified, that knowledge is awakened, right? So that transcendental intelligence, we get that transcendental intelligence, and from that transcendental intelligence, we have a steady mind, right? With the steady mind, we can control the senses. And once this happens, once we check mark all the 3 sitting places, which is senses, mind, and transcendent and intelligence, we can conquer lust, right? So the key is, again and again, chanting is the key for this yuga, right? Chanting, reading, and hearing about Krishna, that builds that intelligence. And once the top hierarchy of the top in the hierarchy is under control, the following repercussions happen accordingly, right? And this is the last shloka for today. And Reshmaji, will you be able to read this?
Yes, Mataji. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should study the mind by steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Bhagavad Gita, 43rd shloka from 3rd chapter.
Thank you. So Krishna is concluding the chapter, right? How can we control this lust? How can we conquer, not control? Conquer is by spiritual intelligence, by that transcendental intelligence. And the next chapter, which is 4th chapter, Krishna will explain, he will say more in detail about the spiritual intelligence. So following chapter will give us more insight on what intelligence or what knowledge, spiritual knowledge, Krishna is talking about here. So the strategy to win over the lust is by spiritual intelligence, right? And yeah, we'll see this further in the 4th chapter. So just the last slide for today, which is from the purport of the 43rd shloka. And Hari Krishna ji, will you be able to read this?
Yeah, Mataji. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by the propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resource of material nature. Desire for overloading and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind. By steady intelligence, this is the sum total of this chapter. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
నాది ఇంటర్నెట్ వాడుతున్నా.
Okay, so this is kind of an sum total of this chapter, right? Which Prabhupada is giving, that desiring, our desires again, play the key role. It's highlighted here that our desire to have things under control, to dominate something, that is overloading, for satisfying of self, right? It is the greatest enemy, right? That is the lust, right? So, and how can this be overcome? By the spiritual strength, right? So so yeah, with that we conclude today's session.